All right, we got a lot of games to run through here in this video. If you want to kind of try to skip ahead to a certain game, this is the order that I'm going to talk about the games in. Clemson, Georgia Tech, Wisconsin, Bama, Pittsburgh, West Virginia, Southern Cal, Purdue, South Florida, Miami, and Arkansas, Ole Miss, in that order. So here we go. Let's start out with Clemson on the road at Georgia Tech. Now, a couple of different things going on here with this game. We'll start with Clemson. They've not looked good. You can sort of write some of that off in week one to, well, LSU's really good. It was a week one game, conservative game plan against a really good defense. It makes sense. And I think that's what a lot of us thought coming out of that game. LSU didn't exactly light up the scoreboard in that game either. Not taking a shot at LSU. They're a good team. They're in everybody's top five. But you came out of that game not really – I don't think you really had a lot to be concerned about coming out of that game for either team. There were some issues with Clemson's offensive line. They didn't throw the ball well. But, again, you look at LSU and you go, really good defense. Well, then week two happens, and Clemson hosts Troy. And while a lot of teams maybe didn't blow out some lower-level teams to the extent you would have thought they would, not very many of them were losing in the third quarter 16-0. And that was the case with Clemson at home against Troy. Now, they scored 24 unanswered points, and they end up winning the game 24-16. But we now have 2 weeks in a row now, one sample against a quality opponent in LSU and one against somebody that you would have expected Clemson to sort of push around in Troy, where their offense has looked really bad. The offensive line has looked bad. The running game has looked non-existent. There was some questions about those things heading into the season for Clemson, the offensive line and the running game, and it looks like those questions might have been answered in the negative, maybe. Now you've got the game on the road at Georgia Tech. Arguably Clemson's most important game of the season so far. The LSU game was a huge game, ranked matchup, top 10 teams, but it was a non-conference game. Now that Clemson has lost that, you look to the conference schedule and you say, okay, what does Clemson need to do to sort of make and win the ACC? They're sort of looking at the same path as last year, right? To sort of get into the playoffs by winning the ACC. Well, in order to do that, a couple of hurdles you have to get over, and the first one is this Saturday on the road at Georgia Tech. Now you look at Georgia Tech. They start the season off with a win on the road at Colorado. Not a great Colorado team. I wouldn't compare the level of competition Georgia Tech has faced to the LSU team that Clemson has faced, but it was a road game against a Power 4 opponent, and Georgia Tech overcame some adversity in that game. If you watched or if you remember back to that week one game, Georgia Tech turned the ball over on their first three possessions, which is alarming. And it's hard to win any game when you turn the ball over three times. It's even harder if you turn it over three times in a row. It's even harder than that if you do it on the road on your first three possessions. Now, Georgia Tech's defense kind of bailed them out there. Those three turnovers only resulted in 7 points for Colorado, and Georgia Tech ends up winning the game. Flash forward to week two for Georgia Tech. They play a relative nobody. They blow them out. The score was extremely lopsided. They played a backup quarterback who showed the ability to throw the ball around, something Haynes King appears unable to do. But the turnover bug jumped up and bit them again in that game. They had a couple of turnovers again this past week. They can't afford that in this game against Clemson. Whatever you think about Clemson, however bad you think they have looked, they're still an extremely talented team. Now, talent doesn't always equate to wins. We see that every year with different teams in college football. But Georgia Tech can't afford to give Clemson a bunch of extra possessions. A team like Clemson that's struggling offensively, the last thing you want to do is give them extra possessions. Maybe you're going to get it figured out or something eventually. I think this is an interesting game here. I think Haynes King is going to play. There's a kind of a shell game going on at Georgia Tech with Haynes King and his health and Philo and who's going to play and are they both going to play and is Haynes King hurt and how hurt is he and is it a new injury? Is it a permanent injury? I'm just sort of operating under the impression at this point that Haynes King has some type of permanent shoulder injury that prevents him from really being able to throw the ball. He's not a very good thrower of the football now. There was a point back in time where he was, but he hasn't been that in a long time. And I don't believe anything really that coaches tell me about injuries in general anyway. So I'm just going off of my own, what I see with my own eyes here. And I think Haynes King is going to play. I don't think he's going to stretch the field. I don't think he can stretch the field. So I think it's going to make Georgia Tech extremely one-dimensional when Haynes King is in the game. Now, I wouldn't be surprised at all if they play Philo some here. It could be a two-quarterback situation for Georgia Tech because he did show the ability last week, although albeit against a lower classification school, that he at least does have the ability to throw the ball and try to stretch the field for Georgia Tech. As many problems as Clemson has offensively, and they do have problems, they have an NFL defense, particularly an NFL front seven, and really good defenses are great at shutting down one-dimensional teams. It's going to be impossible, I think, for Georgia Tech to win this game being one-dimensional. Haynes King is great. He's fun to watch. He's gutty. He's gritty. 3rd and 4, you know he's going to find a way to pick up 5 yards with his legs, and that's great, and that extends a lot of drives for Georgia Tech, and honestly, that wins them a lot of games against a lot of mid-level ACC teams. I don't think that's going to be enough to win this game. They're going to have some sort of passing game, most likely a downfield passing game. That's going to involve offensive line protection. It's going to involve receivers being able to get open and make catches, and most importantly, a quarterback that has the ability to throw that ball downfield. Now, I've gone back and forth on this game a couple of times over the course of the week. I do a Monday night show with my buddy Pigskin Pete, who's a Clemson fan. And on that show, I took Georgia Tech in the points. At the time, it was 3.5. Right now, Georgia Tech's getting 3 points. Clemson is favored by 3 points. And I'm going to be honest, the closer we're getting to Saturday now, the more I'm starting to lean towards Clemson in this game. And to me, these are always the most difficult games, especially early in the season, to kind of figure out. And what I mean is, two opposite things can be true. They seem like opposite things. In other words, Clemson has looked bad. Like, there's really no sugarcoating that. Particularly on offense, Clemson has looked bad. Cade Klubnik appears to have regressed to his 2023 form instead of the good player he looked like in 2024. The wide receivers that started to come on last year have sort of disappeared. The running game for Clemson has looked non-existent. The offensive line has not been able to protect Cade Klubnik. There hasn't been a whole lot of good. All that is true. It's also still true that that's an extremely talented team. Most of the players are back from last year's team that made the college football playoff and won the ACC. And when I look at a situation like that early in the season, I can't help it. It's like I was on Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech can win the game. Clemson's looked terrible. But then in the back of my mind, I'm like, well, Clemson is so talented. What if if they put it together, if they play well, if it starts to click, if they find the running game, if the offensive line can play well. Well, yeah, if those things happen, then I think Clemson could win the game by a couple of touchdowns. And it's possible that does happen. I guess what I'm saying is I don't really have a clue on this game, which is point. I can't say that. This is a prediction video. I also feel like this is Georgia Tech's biggest game of the year. And to put it kind of in poker terms, they're all in on this game. The Colorado game was nice at the beginning of the year. It's nice to have a Power 4 opponent like that you could sort of get yourself excited for all offseason. And Georgia Tech, of course, has their rivalry game at the end of the year with Georgia. And those are big games, particularly the Georgia game, and I'm not diminishing that at all. But those are non-conference games, and this is a conference game against an opponent, Clemson, who's been the class of the ACC for the better part of the last 10 to 15 years. Other teams have been good during that time period, but I mean, Clemson has pretty much dominated the ACC over the last 10 to 15 years. Georgia Tech gets them early in the season here in a year where there is some reason to be excited about Georgia Tech. And through the first 2 weeks, you've looked at Clemson and they look unrecognizable. It feels like Georgia Tech is going to throw everything at this game in an attempt to win it. When you look at Georgia Tech's schedule, it sets up really nice after this game. They don't play Florida State. They don't play Miami, the other two contenders out of the ACC. SMU looks okay, but I think likely to take a step back. Louisville didn't look great against James Madison the other night. If Clemson can win this game if Georgia Tech can win this game at home against Clemson early in the year, the schedule sets up extremely nicely for them the rest of the way. They could afford to even drop a game. It would just be the one ACC loss if they had the win over Clemson, and would likely find themselves in the ACC championship game at the end of the year. They have a tough game at Duke later in the year. They've got some potential landmines, but they avoid some significant landmines on their schedule. So it really feels like this is a game that Clemson has spent the majority of the offseason, circling this game, the must-win game, huge game in conference against the sort of bully on the block in the ACC. And that is why I picked Georgia Tech originally in this game on Monday. And even though The closer it gets to Saturday, sort of that little thing in the back of my head that keeps reminding me how overall talented Clemson is sort of pushing me more that direction towards Clemson. I'm going to stick with my original pick from Monday on the Lunch Money Show, and I'm going to take Georgia Tech in the 3 points, and I would not at all be surprised if they find a way to win this game. But I am very, very curious to see how Georgia Tech handles this quarterback situation with Philo and Haynes King. But give me Georgia Tech. And the 3 points. All right, shout out to the sponsor of today's video, Sleeper. Download the Sleeper app today and have yourself some fun watching these college football games this weekend. Sleeper's America's #1 daily fantasy sports app on the market. Use the promo code LOU, L-O-U, and they're going to match your first deposit dollar for dollar up to $100. So if you deposit $100, they're going to give you another $100 courtesy of Uncle Lou. Like I said, it makes watching these games a lot of fun. And I have a play, speaking of Clemson and Georgia Tech, I have a play over on the Sleeper app that I really like this week. I've got the college football section pulled up here. I'm going to tap on the search bar, and let's find my buddy, Cade Klubnik. Now, if you remember back in week 1, I did a play on Cade Klubnik, and I lost. I'm giving Cade Klubnik a chance to redeem himself. I like more than 1.5 touchdowns for Cade Klubnik this Saturday on the road at Georgia Tech. I have a feeling he's due. Well, he's definitely due. I have a feeling he's going to come through for me this week with at least a couple of passing touchdowns against that Georgia Tech defense. So I'm going to lock it in on Sleeper. Cade Klubnik, more than 1.5 passing touchdowns. There you go. Download the Sleeper app today. It's a lot of fun. It's easy to use. You're just picking more or less on player stats. You can win up to 1,000 times your money. Use promo code LOU. You'll be glad you did. Wisconsin and Bama. Bama favored by 21. Kind of a yo-yo start to the season for Bama. Dominated by Florida State early on in an embarrassing performance. They rebounded last week against a bad Louisiana Monroe team and sort of took out their frustrations on them, beating them 70-0 or whatever it was. I don't know which version of Bama we're going to get Saturday against Wisconsin. My guess is that it's going to be somewhere in the middle. The good news for Bama and Bama fans is that Wisconsin is not Florida State. Wisconsin has been borderline bad over the last 2 or 3 seasons under new head coach Luke Fickell, who has been a massive disappointment there. This is somebody I thought would have success at Wisconsin. Wisconsin was busy winning 9 or 10 games a year, almost every single year. They kind of got tired of that, decided to roll the dice, try to get to the next level. They go out, they get Luke Fickell from Cincinnati, who had taken them to the playoffs, and it hasn't worked. It's been a massive disappointment. He's winning 5-6 games a year. They seem to have no real identity. For the second year in a row now, they're dealing with starting quarterback injuries at the start of the season. It just hasn't been a smooth transition into the Luke Fickell era at Wisconsin. And this is a home game for Bama. Last year, Bama absolutely destroyed them on the road in Madison. And while I guess it's possible that at some point Bama reverts back to sort of the pillow soft version of themselves we saw on the road in week 1 at Florida State, I don't think it'll be at home this week against a pretty bad Wisconsin team. Now, they're favored by 21. I think Bama might blow them out and win by 30. But the bet that I actually like the most in this game, now this is the same sort of philosophy I took last week in the South Florida game, and it didn't work out for me. I'm going to take Bama in the first half. You can bet Bama first half minus 12.5, and that's the bet that I like here. I do think Bama wins the game, but for the bet, give me Bama minus 12.5 in the first half. I took Florida minus 10.5 in the first half last week. Didn't trust Florida in the second half of that game to lay the 18 points. I didn't think Florida would win by 18, but I said I think they can, they'll get out to a big lead in the first half. That, of course, didn't happen. They ended up losing the game outright. But anyway, I'm going to try it again this week on Bama. Give me Bama minus 12.5 in the first half, and I do like Bama to win this game. Backyard brawl, Pitt at West Virginia. West Virginia off to a rocky start. Rich Rodriguez. Well, what's the thing? A dog returning to his vomit or whatever. Rich Rod back again for the first time after a 15-year hiatus or whatever it's been. Had some really good seasons with West Virginia back in the 2000s. He's back now to rebuild a down-and-out West Virginia program that Neil Brown really drove into the ground. Pitt, on the other hand, has looked pretty good. They're 2-0, and they're a 7-point favorite in this game on the road in Morgantown. I do think Pitt's the better team here, but weird things happen in rivalry games, and Rich Rod appreciates and understands the magnitude of this rivalry from his time at Pitt, or his time at West Virginia back in the 2000s. And I think Rich Rod is going to have West Virginia ready to go. I would not be surprised if West Virginia found a way to win this game. I do think they'll keep it close. I'm going to take West Virginia and the 7 points in this game. I think this is going to be a one-possession game. I think this is going to be an ugly, low-scoring, physical, probably going to have some penalties here on both sides. This is a nasty rivalry here. I'm going to take West Virginia +7. I think it's going to be a close game. Southern Cal on the road at Purdue, and Purdue is a 21-point underdog at home. Southern Cal's looked good the first 2 weeks against relative nobodies, but I have the same questions about Southern Cal I'm going to have every year as long as Lincoln Riley is the head coach, and that is, what kind of defense are we going to be looking at here this season? Lincoln Riley has consistently fielded some of the worst defenses in all of college football for 7, 8, 9 years in a row. I don't know what we're going to get from them this year. I don't think you can judge them off the competition they've played so far. And while I do think they are a better team than Purdue, this is a lot of travel here in an unfamiliar environment. Purdue, I don't think is going to be as bad as they were last year. I think they're going to be an improved team. Are they going to, win 8 or 9 games? No, but I think they'll be better than they were last year. And I think they can keep it closer than 21. I think they will be able to score on this Southern Cal defense. Like I said, until proven otherwise, I'm just not trusting the Southern Cal defense. 21 points seems like a lot. Give me Purdue plus the 21, but I do think Southern Cal wins the game. South Florida at Miami. This is a lot of people talking about this one. South Florida pulled off the upset of the season so far last week. Well, maybe that goes to Florida State still with their week 1 win against Bama, but South Florida's pulled off 2 big upsets in a row. They knocked off Boise State at home in week 1, blew them out 34-7, and then they knocked off in-state Power 4 opponent Florida last week on the road in Gainesville. A thrilling game, came down to the end. They kicked a field goal to win it. Could have been the nail in Billy Napier's coffin. We'll see about that as the season goes along. And it doesn't get any easier for South Florida, who definitely is not afraid to schedule tough opponents. I mean, I don't know who's got a tougher non-con as far as the group of 5 goes than South Florida. They schedule Boise State, although a group of 5 team was a playoff team last year. Then they play on the road at Florida. Now they're playing on the road at Miami, and they've been a great story. Alex Golich is one of the hottest names in coaching right now and is probably going to have his pick of landing spots at open jobs heading into next season. Their quarterback, Byron Brown, is exciting and fun to watch. I'm not buying it this week. I think Miami is going to lay it on them. Carson Beck has looked really good at quarterback, very comfortable behind an NFL offensive line. He's got all day to sit in the pocket back there. And whatever you think about Carson Beck and his personality and his ex-girlfriend and his Lamborghinis and his Instagram and his TikToks and not getting along with the teammates at Georgia and all that, whatever you think about all that, he's a hell of a football player. He completed over 90% of his passes last week. He's already got a win against Notre Dame where he played really well. He is looking good early in the season, and Miami appears to be much improved defensively, and I already mentioned their offensive line. I think the best in all of football. I think Miami is going to win this game going away. They're favored by 17. I like Miami to win by at least 3 touchdowns. Give me Miami, lay the 17. South Florida's been a great story, and they may still wind up in the playoffs at the end of the year as the highest-rated group of 5 team. But as far as this week goes, I think the magic carpet ride comes to an end. I like the Canes to win big. And finally, Arkansas on the road at Ole Miss. Ole Miss got a big win this past week against Kentucky. On the road in Lexington. Now they come back home and host Arkansas. It was sort of a revenge spot last week for Ole Miss after having lost to Kentucky the season before. They go on the road to Lexington and get a win by 7 against Kentucky. I think Arkansas is better than Kentucky. Arkansas might be a little bit better than we thought they were heading into the season. Their quarterback has looked really good early on, and he's one of these guys that can sort of elevate his entire team when he gets going. He's fun to watch. He can run around. He can make some of these highlight plays with his legs. And I think there's going to be some of that this week against a rebuilt Ole Miss defense. I don't like Kentucky offensively at all. I think Arkansas is a much better offensive team than Kentucky. I think Talon Green, is it Talon Green or Talon Green? I think it's Talon Green, the quarterback for Arkansas, a much better quarterback than the Calzone at Kentucky, Zach Calzada, who has bounced around college football for, it seems like, forever. I actually think this is an upset alert type game here for Ole Miss. I don't know how many games Arkansas is going to win in the SEC this season, but I do feel like they're going to beat somebody that, when it's over, people are going to go, how the hell did that happen? You remember last year Arkansas beat Tennessee, a team that went on to make the playoffs. So they've shown this sort of ability to kind of rise up once or twice a year and play good enough to knock off some pretty good teams. Maybe this is that week. I don't feel confident enough in that on the road. Like they beat Tennessee at home. They're on the road this week in Oxford at Ole Miss. I don't feel confident enough to sort of roll the dice and take Arkansas to win outright, but I will take Arkansas plus the 7 points. I think they can keep this thing close. There you go. What is that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of the games coming up this Saturday. I've got a couple more of these kind of prediction type videos to make. Make sure you hit the thumbs up, subscribe to the channel if you're new. Let me know down below what you think about these games. Don't forget to download the Sleeper app, the promo code LOU, L-O-U. They're going to match your first deposit dollar for dollar up to $100. So get yourself up to $100 courtesy of Uncle Lou. You can have yourself some fun watching these college football games this weekend and potentially make up to 1,000 times your money. Download the Sleeper app today, promo code LOU. Appreciate you watching. Have a good morning.